Rob, so good to see you, man. It's great to see your face. Missed you, and just great to see you smiling and on this side of the earth, man. Good to see you.
Nice seeing you too, Josh. I always appreciate the opportunity just to have a conversation with you like we always do.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Hey, listen, we are all well aware of change. We're almost getting past change, and now we're getting into change, which is interesting because change is inevitable. But one of the things I want to talk to you about is, this whole series is launch you. So how do people launch themselves into the next chapter of their life? And you have such a dynamic role at ASAE, and when you have so many different hats that you wear, but really the one universal hat that you wear across all these different disciplines is equipping organizations for change. So whether it's marketing, whether it's strategy, whether it's meetings, a vital role that you play is equipping your organization to navigate and change through things. And so there's a soft skill to that. There is a disposition to that. And I think it would be amazing to spend some time for folks in the industry to go, hey, how do you equip an organization for change? And so we kind of talk about coaching like this: education, challenge, and inspiration.
Right.
So let me ask you this first question.
Sure.
Why is it important for an individual in an organization to be available and to be aware of how to equip their organization for change? Why do they need to be able to do that?
I love the question, and it's something that I think that's on the minds of many. So, my perspective is simply this: that the old school kind of adage about thinking outside the box, and the problem is that we presume that there is a box, and that there are lines, and that's a barrier, right? Because it's a barrier of it prevents us from truly kind of embracing, well, what are the goals and what are we trying to accomplish and solving for that first and foremost, as opposed to solving for what's known, solving for what we're comfortable with. It forces you to think a little bit differently, and it's harder, and that's the truth of the matter. Whether you talk about innovation, creativity, man, it's like something that's on the tips of the tongues of many. But why is it hard? It's hard when it's like, well, actually, the idea has to work. I mean, it's got to work based on how you're evaluating. How you're evaluating is based on the goal. So, and how you get to those goals and achieve them is by considering that there shouldn't be a box in the first place. So, the answer that I think about is what what are we truly trying to solve for at the core?
Mm.
And I want to be crystal clear about that. And that's an ongoing dialogue with the organization, because it changes and the
Yeah.
priorities can change. So that's kind of the beginning point. I'll stop there for a moment but that's where I start.
No, I was just talking to somebody about the book Measure What Matters.
Yeah.
And I think when I think about why is it important for somebody to be in this equation, is that you've got to be the person in the organization that says, hey, I'm aware of what matters, and I'm going to help us measure it. And if you are, I hear you saying that, of like, look, first of all, don't think about being in a box. Second of all, you've got to understand what we're trying to solve. And it's so important for you to be in your organization and say, I'm aware of what we need to solve. And if you're not that person in the organization, then you really can't equip it to change. So I think being how important it is to have domain knowledge of what needs to change, and again, so that you can measure what matters.
I love what you're saying, Josh, because it reminds me. I'll use a DEI term to express a sentiment here, and that's intersectionality from a DEI standpoint. That's really the interrelationship. So applying that to an organizational structure and the thought perspective that comes along with that, it's wanting to, if we consider, I think that it's helpful to consider ourselves as stakeholders.
Yeah.
So I have domain specific experience in marketing and some other areas, right? But that's not necessarily how I show up in the organizational setting. That's an expectation, and it's expectation that I have that on some level. But what's the real benefit? And I think that's a question that I always kind of ask myself, because what that real benefit is for me at this stage is, but here's the trick, is that I've always kind of thought this way, honestly. So it's
Right.
now I'm in a position where I can maybe deliver on that premise a little bit better. But it's thinking about what are those interrelationships and how are they knitted together. And I don't necessarily challenge the fact that they are knitted together. I actually try to search for where and how they are knitted together, and then pose the question, is that going to judgment? Is that going to give us an opportunity to achieve what I hear us talking about we want to achieve?
Yeah. Yep. So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
One specific action that a
Mhm.
user that a listener can do, that an audience listener here can do to put themselves in a position to bring change in an organization. What's one thing if somebody came to you and said, Rob, I really want to create change in my organization, what should I do?
I would capture, um, I would ask the question very clearly, what are the goals, and press down on that.
Mm,
And, understand the difference between strategies, tactics, and goals,
mm,
and be really crystal clear about, what are the goals. So if I were to ask you, Josh, what is it that you want? I need to get inside your head.
yep.
I need to understand you're the CEO. I need to understand what's making you tick on some level.
Yep.
I understand what your responsibility is, but I also got to better understand what is that you really want to drive. And if I can kind of hone in on that and I can get you to articulate to me, that may or may not be my vision. That's perfectly fine. I'm not here to sell you on a particular perspective if you're the CEO. I'm here to understand what you want to achieve and then figure out how is it that we can bring that to life.
Yeah. And if I say to you, this is our final coaching, it's kind of the inspiring, Rob,
Yeah.
I don't think I can do that. Tell me why I can do that. I'm just a little cog in the wheel. I'm not a major player. Why should I believe I could actually be a significant player in my organization?
Yeah. Well, you've got to believe it first. And it has nothing to do, my humble opinion, it has nothing to do with hierarchy. It has nothing
Mm,
to do with experience. It has everything to do with the willingness to thoughtfully challenge,
yep.
constructively challenge. And if you are asking the right kind of questions, and it doesn't mean that even when you ask the questions, if there's not the answers that you were expecting or the answers that you want, it doesn't mean that you give up.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes you have to be patient. So,
Mm,
I might think my idea is brilliant and you hate it. Okay, well, I got more ideas that you can say
yeah,
no to than you can
exactly.
say yes to. So I'm not worried about that. But I think, A, you got to believe that. And B, you have to be willing to say, be willing to be wrong
Yeah.
and to take a chance and to
Yep.
not really care how it looks.
Yeah.
And I think those are the two things that can get in the way sometimes. Um, I think that's critical for all of us. It's something that I think all of us can develop. If we don't have it, to your point, then we can develop it. We've got to trust ourselves
Yeah.
to develop
So,
that.
so moving into the next part, because I think this is leading right into it, we call it an in and out framework. And
Yeah.
Rob, we'll end up putting these into an article so
Yep.
people can read this too. But I always like to say, what are things that you need in your life, and what are things that you need out of your life if you're going to be somebody who brings change to an organization? So if I came and said, Rob, what are some disciplines that I need in my life so that I can stay this person, and then we'll get to kind of what I need to get out of it. But
Yeah.
what's a practical thing I need in my life?
Yeah, I love the way you think, Josh. I love it. So here, what do I need in my life? I need access and exposure to people like you, people who will challenge, who will be comfortable saying, you know what, I disagree.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That that like me on a interpersonal level, and maybe in some instances are actually really good friends, but good enough friends that they say, yeah, I don't see it that way, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure why you do.
It's good. That's
And
what we need in our life. I mean,
and
we need challengers in our life.
yeah.
And I'm experiencing it, Rob. Juno's off to this wild run, and it's so unknown. And we've got some really neat investors that these guys have, man, the things they've done. And it's amazing to have people in your life that just
Mhm.
challenge everything. And sometimes you get done and you feel, do I feel defeated? Oh, that's not what that feeling is. I feel stretched.
Yeah.
And you're trying to, and I think it's like that feeling of like, oh, I don't want anybody in my life that makes me feel defeated.
Right.
Well, you're not, it's not defeated. It's
Mm-mm.
you're growing is that feeling.
Yeah.
That's a feeling of growth.
John, I mean, it's like you embracing that feeling of challenging, truly being comfortable with that. Yeah, I love that because that's where it kind of begins and can end. Yeah, there's a term that we often use, in the lexicon these days, empowerment. I can't stand the term. It's a
Okay.
wonderful term. I mean, it's a great word, but I don't like it. I don't
Mm.
like it because it's the presumption is that you have to wait for somebody to, you have to be knighted
Mm.
or, anointed
Yep.
power before you can speak. And I do not believe that.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the early part of that conversation. It's like, no, everybody, we all have our own power. You just have to understand, you know, it's not about your power. It's about seeing the landscape and figuring out what is the change that you think is required and then creating a pathway to it.
That's cool. What do you need out of your life? So we know we need
Yeah.
challenge in.
Right.
We know we need to give ourselves permission
Yep.
to go. What do we need out? If we're going to be somebody who brings change in an organization, you got to stop doing that. You got to get that out of your life.
Caring about everything equally.
Mm.
I that's a challenge. And I think that's something that you got to get out. I mean, if you look at, Warren Buffett, you look at, any, numerous leaders out there. If you're someone who appreciates leadership, you know, um, literature, and there's a boatload of it, as we all know. One of the things that I've happened upon over the years, and it's a pretty consistent theme, and that being that, decide how you want to spend your time
Yeah.
because you don't have an infinite amount of it. So it's as simple. The statement or that perspective is simple in saying it and sharing it, but the complexity of doing it is something that I think we probably make too complex. And the reason being is because it's hard to decide what not to do,
Yeah.
and that's why it's hard.
No, I think it's such a discipline, and it's a mature discipline.
Yeah.
You get to the point that you go, when I wake up in the morning, not everything is equal. And
Right.
then here's another layer of it. Sometimes the person who I want to influence most, the thing that I need to do, that's the least important. So you've got some
Mhm.
dynamics here where you've got interpersonal and actionable, and sometimes those don't match. So maybe one of my investors says, "Hey, I really want you to do this thing for me." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, he's really important. She's really important. I need to get this to him." But then I look at the business challenges that day and I go, "That's just not a priority." So you've got to even go, when you look at this, there's these, it's dynamic, but you have to have the maturity to go, I can't weight everything equally. I need to understand how I'm viewing it so that I can make the best business decision for change.
It's funny, Josh, because there's somebody I know really well who came into my life a couple years ago now, and kind of was espousing something along these same lines, and that person was you. Somebody who's obviously very successful, but was willing to make that judgment call, and that's why it's hard.
Mm,
It's like, yeah, I've got to navigate that now. I've
yeah.
got to choose. So it's not only being aware of what the variables are, not only being aware of the dynamics, not only being aware of what everybody wants, but also, using that awareness to influence your judgment and to make a judgment and a decision.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
again,
hard.
it goes back to the first thing. If you put in your life empowerment and challenge,
Yeah.
then it makes sense to get out of your life, these things that limit you from being able to make those decisions. So one of the things we talk about is the 5 stages of EQ, which is
Yep.
awareness, choice, motivation, empathy, and skills. And we always want to ask one question. And it's, if I was going to ask myself one question, you know, what question can I ask myself to make sure that I'm staying aware um, of the reality that I'm putting myself in position to create change? Sometimes you can wake up and go, gosh, I spent a whole year in this organization and I don't know that I really ever empowered. I don't ever pushed back. I don't know ever did anything. What's that little question I can ask myself to make sure I'm staying in the game of bringing change in an organization?
So I have two questions to pose. One would be, and related to the concept we were just talking about and the discipline that's required, asking myself, on a fairly regular basis, the things that I'm doing, on a day-to-day basis, whether those be reports or whatever it is, do they really have value?
Hmm.
Do they have value to the people that I'm providing them to?
Yeah.
And let me go and ask them that,
Yeah.
because I might enjoy doing it or I might not enjoy doing it. I don't know. If I don't ask, chances are they're never going to come to me and say, hey, Rob, you know what, I don't need that wonderful report that you're spending 2 months on. I don't need that
Right.
anymore. They'll
Yep.
never say that. You'll just keep doing that wonderful report and keep adding more wonderful reports. So that's one question, is to ask that question and to look at those things in your life, in your work life, and say, you know what, let me go ask XYZ.
Yeah.
Is this really of value to you?
Yep.
I think that's critical. I think that's part of the pathway, honestly.
I love that. I mean, to simply ask the question, is this function that I'm doing
Yeah.
helpful and important to you? Or is there another thing I can be doing to help you? Which choice is the second one about EQ is when you realize it's not just that I'm aware that I can create change. It's that I actually have the choice to go ask that question. And I think one of the things we often think is like, well, I don't have the right to do it. So what's one of those things, what's the question you can ask yourself
Mhm.
that goes, wait a minute. And maybe it's simply this, are you empowered to empower?
Hmm.
Ask yourself that question. And
Yeah,
if you're not empowered to empower, are you empowered to push back? Are you empowered to empower? If you're not, you now have a choice to go get empowered to do it or go somewhere else because you
yeah,
can't impact change if you're not empowered to empower. You got to ask yourself that question. Are you empowered to empower? I think it's
yeah.
worth asking.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think, the related concept would be that, thinking back on a very, practical matter, reflecting back periodically, over the last year, saying, okay, what were the things that were most important to me?
Yep.
What was the work? And did that get done or did it not? Was it, if it did not get done, why didn't it get done?
Yeah.
Is it only important to me? Is it only important to and not important to other people? But all of that leading you to a place of, I need to decide whether or not I'm going to spend time doing that. I
Yep.
may think it's the most important thing in the world, but if I can't get, more people to get behind it, I'm now wasting my time.
Yeah. Which is our next one, motivation. What I think a question to ask is, motivation happens in all these different ways. Some people are motivated by money, some of it's
Yeah.
by attention, some of it's by leisure. Why do you want to create change in your organization? What motivates you? And it's just a simple question. And
Yeah.
it's one of the ones you want to ask yourself, why do you want to do it?
Yeah.
Because if you understand your motivation, you'll also understand how you show up. So I think always an interesting thing. Why do you want to do this?
Mhm. You know, um, you think about sometimes the gap between what you want versus what you're willing to do to achieve
Mhm.
it,
That's
right?
good.
And how big is that gap? How big is that gap? So that's one view. Um, I guess related to that is the things that for each of us. I mean, I love the question, what motivates you? Yeah, I can tell you, for me, what motivates me is I love to see things, whatever those things are, get better. I
Mm,
love that. That's what motivates me. I like to. There's an old, basketball coach, Larry Brown. I went to the University of Kansas, so
yeah,
won a national championship a couple times. Great basketball program. But Larry Brown was always one of those people where he was the guy, that would come in and he would fix the program,
mm,
and he would fix it and get it running in the right way. And there was a specific way and a specific story narrative that he created in order to achieve success that he
mm,
that he was able to grasp. And then he was willing to move on because all of a sudden the challenge wasn't there anymore, and it was a different challenge, and he didn't like that challenge. He liked the fix it challenge.
yeah,
So I don't know that I'm necessarily like Larry Brown, certainly not from an accomplishment standpoint, but I do appreciate what I have kind of embraced about his orientation is that I like things to work better.
yep,
If something's broken, I love to come in and figure out, okay, let's make it work better and see how far we can take it.
yeah,
And then at some point, it's as far as it goes in that particular iteration. And then, you move on to the change of focus, turn your head to the left or the right or whatever direction you want to go.
absolutely. So good. One of the things I think that we say is after motivation is empathy.
Mhm.
And empathy is just really the ability to say, hey, if I'm going to create change in an organization, I have to be aware of how other people feel. And
Yes.
so a question that we've got to ask ourselves is maybe before I go empower or challenge, am I aware of how the person or the organization is actually feeling right now?
Yeah.
And there's an overall ethos, right, that an organization feels. Like right now, ASAE as a whole feels something,
Mhm.
but then each individual feels something either similar or different.
Right.
And I think a question we've got to ask ourselves is, am I, before I do anything,
Mhm.
do I have empathy? Can I feel how the organization feels and how the individual feels before I empower and challenge and ask questions?
Josh, those are, I mean, those are beautiful leadership traits, right? And, you know, leadership is easy when the decisions and the judgments are clear
Hmm.
and it's black and white. The
Mm,
challenge is that it's rarely black and white.
yeah,
And the middle ground, the gray area, is where the empathy comes in.
that's
Because
right.
black and white decisions, any rational person can make. Well, great. Then everybody's fantastic at what they do. And that's not the case. We all try to be the best, but being, as effective as we can in the way that you just talked about, with that layer of empathy and understanding, and realizing that logic can take you part of the way down the path, but it doesn't take you all the way.
Mm,
Because that's the stuff, those are the things you can kind of check off as you go,
yeah,
by and large. It's
yeah,
that other stuff. Well, how do you move the bigger pieces forward? It's understanding, what's the emotional state?
yeah.
Where is the organization and the people? Where are they on that change curve, if you will? There's a continuum there.
What one skill
Mhm.
somebody should work on having and refining if they're going to bring change to an organization?
Hmm. Um, I would say being calm,
Mm,
um, measured, settled. I think those are the types of traits that can make sure that you don't get distracted easily,
mm,
because there are a lot of distractions.
good.
And that's how I would think about that. It's like, there's, the ability to, and I'm saying this, saying those, that's what I aspire to. I'm not saying I'm good at it. What I'm saying is that I think it's important, because I've seen the benefits of that, when you can, and observing a lot of leaders out there, a lot of, honestly, I just observe people.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, leaders are all around us, because we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form.
yeah,
So I also don't like to, that's not something, again, a term that is, selectively applied. Everybody leads in some way, shape, or form, and I can learn from anybody.
yeah.
Um, but as a consequence, some of the things that I've seen work are those types of, traits and skills, where you can just kind of sit back. And so we all talk about listen, but it's like, listen with your heart in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's different.
I think being measured, I mean, it's such a discipline to be able to say, I am being able to measure the way I respond and
Yeah.
react and the time I give to do it. I'm not, reactionary, but I'm calm and measured so that I can process information
Right.
and make good feedback. Rob, thank you so much, man. This has been great. We've been able to navigate through our framework. I think it's so important to understand the videos. I think it's understanding to talk about in and out. I think it's great to talk about the EQs. And I think anybody that listens to this is going to walk away and go, I'm more equipped to bring change to my organization. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Josh. Wonderful conversation. Always enjoy talking with you. It's truly always a pleasure. I always get something out of it, and you always push me. So thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity just to converse, and be another data point for any of us out there that are trying to move things forward. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. It's always my pleasure. So.